My name is Elise, I'm 28 years old, and I've spent my entire adult life carrying a quiet, heavy burden no one in my family ever acknowledged. I have been paying for my own life, my own bills, my own medical expenses, and my own survival since I was 16 years old, while my older brother Ethan, 3 years my senior, grew up spoiled, coddled, and completely shielded from every single consequence of his reckless, selfish choices. For 12 years, I bit my tongue, worked endless part-time jobs through high school and college, skipped meals, skipped social events, skipped every small luxury just to stay afloat financially, all while watching my parents pour every penny they had, every ounce of their favoritism, and every bit of their grace into my brother, who never lifted a finger to support himself. Last month, after 2 years of backbreaking overtime work, endless client overtime shifts, and flawless performance at my full-time corporate job, I finally received my long-awaited annual performance bonus. It was the first large sum of entirely unencumbered money I had ever earned in my life, money I had planned to use to fix my aging car, pay off my remaining small student loan balance, and finally build a tiny emergency savings fund for myself for the very first time. I'd spent years living paycheck to paycheck, never splurging on myself, never asking my family for a single cent of help, never leaning on them for anything. But the second my mom found out about my bonus check hitting my bank account, everything changed. She called me sobbing, hysterical, broken down on the phone, begging and demanding that I hand over every single penny of my hard-earned bonus, all to pay off my older brother's massive, self-created gambling debts. When I refused to drain my life's first real financial breakthrough to clean up his reckless mess, she screamed the sentence every overlooked, unappreciated child in a toxic family knows all too well: "You owe us for raising you." For years, that guilt-tripping line had worked on me. For years, I'd caved to their demands, apologized for being selfish, and sacrificed my own future to fix my brother's mistakes. But not this time. This time, I was done carrying the weight of their favoritism and his irresponsibility. Instead of arguing, instead of screaming, instead of begging for understanding, I did something silent, calculated, and irreversible. I compiled every single old medical bill, every school fee receipt, every utility payment I'd ever covered alone, every self-paid emergency expense from my teenage years to my current adult life, scanned every last record, and sent the entire folder via email to my parents in full detail. Within 10 minutes, my mom stopped texting me completely. No more cries, no more demands, no more guilt trips, no more fake sobbing. She went radio silent overnight. But the peace didn't last long. The second my dad and my brother saw the email full of proof of my lifelong self-sacrifice, the entire family group chat exploded into absolute chaos. Every aunt, uncle, cousin, and distant family member rushed in to pick sides, accused me of being cold-hearted, ungrateful, cruel, and selfish for abandoning family in need. This is the full, unfiltered, hour-long true story of how I broke free from decades of toxic family guilt, ended generational favoritism, and finally stopped paying for my brother's endless mistakes with my own life. Welcome back to Real Revenge Diary, the channel that shares raw, unfiltered real-life family stories from people who spent their entire lives being the responsible child, the stable one, the financial backup plan, and the permanent fixer for every selfish, entitled family member's mistakes. If you grew up in a household with a golden child and a scapegoat child, if your sibling got all the love, all the money, all the forgiveness, and all the second chances while you got all the blame, all the bills, all the responsibility, and all the guilt, this story is going to hit far too close to home. How many times have you heard your parents say, "Family is everything," only when they need your money, your time, and your sacrifice? How many times have you been told, "You owe us," for being raised? Even though you've been financially independent and self-sufficient since you were a teenager, how many times have you had to clean up a reckless sibling's mess while they face zero consequences and continue being praised by your parents? Before we dive into every single detail of this decades-long family dynamic, every hidden sacrifice, every unfair double standard, and the explosive family group chat fallout that followed my decision, drop a comment below and type, "I know this pain," if you've ever been guilt-tripped into paying for a family member's selfish mistakes. Subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications, because this story does not end with a dramatic fight, it ends with permanent boundaries, silent justice, and a family forced to face their own unfairness for the very first time. To understand why sending those old bill records was the most powerful, final response I could ever give, you need to understand the full context of my entire childhood and young adulthood. My older brother Ethan is 21 months older than me, and from the day he was born, he was the undisputed golden child of our family. My parents treated him like he could do no wrong. Every mistake he made was excused, every bad choice was justified, every failure was blamed on external circumstances, and every small win was celebrated like a massive life achievement. I, on the other hand, was raised under a completely different set of rules. I was expected to be perfect, responsible, quiet, obedient, and endlessly grateful. I was expected to never cause trouble, never ask for help, never spend money frivolously, and always drop everything to accommodate my brother's needs. Growing up, Ethan got new phones, new gaming consoles, brand-name clothes, weekend outings with friends, and unlimited spending money from my parents. I got hand-me-downs, strict spending limits, constant lectures about being frugal, and zero financial support for anything in my life. The double standard became painfully obvious starting when I was just 16 years old, the year I legally became old enough to get a part-time job. Up until that point, all basic childhood expenses were covered by my parents, at least, that's what every normal child expects. But the second I turned 16, everything shifted. My parents immediately stopped covering any of my personal costs. No more school supply money, no more lunch money, no more medical co-pays, no more clothing allowances, no more activity fees for my school clubs. They told me bluntly, "You're old enough to work now. Your brother is still our priority, he needs more support, so you can handle your own expenses from now on." Meanwhile, Ethan was 18 at the time, already an adult, and my parents continued paying for his gas, his food, his hobbies, his phone bill, his outings, and even his impulsive shopping sprees for years after I started fully supporting myself. Throughout my entire junior and senior year of high school, I worked 2 part-time jobs before and after school every single day. I woke up at 5 in the morning to work a bakery shift before first period, then worked a retail shift every evening until closing time. Every single dollar I earned went straight to my school fees, my textbooks, my daily meals, my basic toiletries, and my occasional doctor or dentist visits. I saved every receipt, logged every payment, and kept every single medical bill and school bill because I knew even back then that my parents would never acknowledge how much I sacrificed. When I graduated high school and moved on to college, the unfairness amplified tenfold. My parents refused to pay a single dollar of my tuition, my housing, my textbooks, or my college living expenses. They told me I was independent and capable and needed to figure it out on my own. Yet during my entire 4 years of college, they continued sending Ethan hundreds of dollars every month for his entertainment, his video games, his takeout food, and his random impulsive purchases. Ethan dropped out of community college within his first semester, never held a steady job, never paid a single bill in his life, and still received full financial support from our parents well into his 20s. Through all of my college years, I survived on scholarships, student loans, and non-stop part-time work. I skipped holidays with friends, skipped spring break trips, skipped every fun college experience just to make sure I could cover my bills and stay enrolled in school. I never once called my parents begging for money. I never complained about my lifestyle. I never asked them to sacrifice a single thing for me. I simply worked harder, pushed through the exhaustion, and built my own life from absolutely nothing. After graduation, I landed a stable corporate entry-level job and worked my way up through consistent overtime, perfect work attendance, and endless dedication. I built my career entirely on my own, with zero family connections, zero family financial support, zero family mentorship. I paid off my college loan interest every single month, covered all my rent, utilities, car payments, and medical costs entirely independently. I never once asked my parents for a handout, a loan, or even emotional support during my hardest days. And through every single year of my adult independence, my brother Ethan spiraled further and further into recklessness. He tried and quit multiple jobs, accumulated small debts here and there, began gambling on sports and online casino platforms, and developed a terrible addictive habit that my parents continuously bailed him out of. Every time he racked up a new debt, my parents would dip into their savings to pay it off, then turn to me and demand I contribute more money to help the family. For years, I caved. I gave in to their guilt trips. I sent small amounts of money to ease their stress, even though I knew I was enabling my brother's terrible habits. I believed their lie that family always helps family, even though the help only ever flowed one way, from me to them, never the other way around. This year, I decided enough was enough. I'd spent my entire youth and early adulthood sacrificing every comfort for stability, while my brother wasted his life away on reckless choices and my parents enabled every single bad decision he made. For so long, I'd held on to a quiet, foolish hope that if I kept being good, kept being responsible, kept giving without complaint, my parents would eventually see my effort, acknowledge my sacrifice, and treat me with the same kindness and grace they freely gave to Ethan. I thought obedience and self-reliance would earn me parental pride, if not equal love. But year after year, that hope faded little by little, replaced by a quiet, steady clarity. My family's favoritism was not a temporary mistake, not a phase, not something I could fix with better behavior or more sacrifice. It was a permanent, ingrained family culture that would never change on its own. I'd watched Ethan get endless second chances for every mistake, big and small, while I was punished for the smallest imperfection. When Ethan skipped school to hang out with friends, my parents said he was just a young kid blowing off steam. When I missed a single homework deadline after working a 12-hour double shift, I was lectured for hours about being lazy and irresponsible. When Ethan crashed my parents' car and totaled it, they forgave him immediately, bought a new vehicle within a week, and never made him pay a single cent for the damage. When I scratched my own used car that I'd purchased entirely with my own part-time job money, my parents scolded me for being careless and told me I needed to be more grateful for what I had, even though they'd never lifted a finger to help me buy it. These tiny, daily double standards stacked up over a decade, creating a massive, unspoken gap between how my brother and I were treated. I learned early on that in my family, responsibility was not rewarded, it was exploited. The more reliable I became, the more my family took my strength for granted, assuming I would always be the one to pick up the pieces, stay calm during crises, and sacrifice my own needs to keep everyone else comfortable. Ethan's recklessness was normalized, excused, and coddled, while my independence was treated as a given, as if I was naturally supposed to carry the weight for everyone else simply because I was capable. Going into my third year at my corporate job, I made a conscious decision to stop prioritizing my family's peace over my own future. For 2 full years, I pushed myself harder than I ever had before, determined to build a life that no one could take from me, no one could guilt trip away, no one could exploit for their own benefit. I worked more overtime hours than any other employee on my team, took on extra client projects that no one else wanted, stayed late every single week, and sacrificed my weekends for work consistently for 2 full years. I skipped birthday gatherings with friends, turned down every vacation invitation, worked through minor colds and headaches, and never once called out sick, even on my most exhausted days. I also turned down every single small request my family made for extra money during those 2 years, something I'd never done before. Every time my parents texted asking for grocery money, every time Ethan texted asking for quick cash for gas or snacks, I politely declined. For the first time, I put my own financial stability first, and the quiet guilt I felt at first slowly faded away as I realized I was not being selfish, I was finally being fair to myself. I'd spent 12 years putting everyone else first, and not a single person had ever thanked me or returned the favor. My relentless hard work finally paid off in the best way possible. At my annual performance review, my manager officially informed me I would be receiving a substantial year-end performance bonus. It was the largest single sum of money I had ever earned in my life, a payout that reflected every late night, every skipped break, every extra project, and every personal sacrifice I'd made over 2 grueling years. After taxes, it was enough to completely eliminate my lingering student loan debt, replace my unreliable old car that constantly broke down, and build a proper 3-month emergency savings fund for myself for the first time ever. That old car of mine was a constant source of stress and anxiety. It was a 15-year-old hand-me-down with over 200,000 miles, frequent engine troubles, faulty brakes, and a broken AC that left me sweltering through every summer commute. More than once, it stalled on the highway during rush hour, leaving me stranded and terrified, forced to pay expensive tow fees and repair costs that ate up entire paychecks. I'd been putting off replacing it for years, choosing to prioritize bills, loans, and occasional family handouts instead of my own safety and peace of mind. This bonus was finally my chance to end that endless cycle of stress. My student loans were another heavy weight I'd carried since college. Even with scholarships and endless part-time work, I'd been forced to take out small loans to cover housing and textbook costs, and the monthly interest payments lingered for years, chipping away at every paycheck and preventing me from saving any real money. I'd made every minimum payment on time, never missed a due date, and never defaulted, but the debt still loomed over me like a dark cloud, a constant reminder of how alone I'd been in building my own future. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't have to live paycheck to paycheck. For the first time, I could breathe. For the first time, I could reward myself for years of endless hard work and self-denial. I was overjoyed, relieved, and hopeful for my future. I planned every detail carefully: pay off debt, fix my transportation security, build safety savings, and finally stop living in constant financial fear. I daydreamed about what it would feel like to wake up in the morning without dreading upcoming bill due dates, without calculating every dollar I spent, without fearing a single emergency expense would send me spiraling into debt again. I only told my parents about the bonus in passing during a casual phone call, thinking they would be proud of me. I thought they would acknowledge my years of hard work, my discipline, my responsibility, and my independence. I thought for once, they would celebrate my success instead of only celebrating my brother's smallest wins. I imagined them saying they were proud of how far I'd come on my own, how dedicated I was, how responsible I'd always been. I even briefly hoped they might apologize for all the years they'd overlooked my sacrifices, for all the times they'd guilt-tripped me for choosing myself, for all the favoritism I'd endured in silence. I was utterly wrong. The second the words left my mouth, their entire tone shifted. The casual, friendly conversation vanished instantly. My mom went quiet on the phone for several long seconds, and I could hear her and my dad whispering rapidly in the background, their voices urgent and tense, like they'd just been handed a solution to a secret crisis they'd been hiding for months. I had no idea at that moment that my brother's gambling addiction had finally caught up to him in the worst way possible, and that my family was already planning to drain my bonus to clean up his massive mess. In that innocent moment, I still believed my family loved me enough to celebrate my first big win. That illusion would be shattered completely within 24 hours. The very next morning, I received an urgent incoming call from my mom. I answered assuming it was a quick follow-up check-in about my bonus, maybe a few words of congratulations, maybe a simple, good for you, to acknowledge my hard work. Instead, I was greeted with loud, hysterical sobbing that immediately sent my heart racing. My mom was crying uncontrollably, her voice shaking, gasping for breath like her world was falling apart, like we were facing a life-or-death emergency instead of a financial problem caused by my brother's reckless choices. I immediately panicked, asking her what was wrong, if someone was hurt, if there was an emergency, if anyone was in the hospital. My mind raced through every worst-case scenario: illness, accidents, family tragedy, completely unaware that her dramatic breakdown was manufactured entirely to manipulate me into giving up my hard-earned money. For a solid minute, she continued sobbing uncontrollably, refusing to explain anything, letting me spiral into fear and worry, preying on my natural instinct to care for my family and fix their problems. Through her tears, she finally explained the crisis. My brother Ethan had accumulated a huge, dangerous gambling debt from months of online betting and sports gambling. He'd hidden the debt from my parents for months, lying about his spending, hiding bank statements, deleting transaction alerts, borrowing small sums from random online lenders, and covering his tracks masterfully until the creditors finally threatened legal action and late fees that would destroy his credit permanently. The total debt was almost the exact amount of my entire bonus check, a cruel, terrifying coincidence that my family viewed as fate that I was meant to sacrifice my future to save my brother again. What my parents intentionally left out of their dramatic story was every single detail that proved this crisis was entirely their fault as well as Ethan's. They omitted the fact that they'd known Ethan was gambling for over 2 years, had found his betting apps multiple times, had scolded him briefly but never taken away his financial freedom, never cut off his spending money, never forced him to attend counseling or face consequences. They'd brushed off his addiction as harmless fun, young men being reckless, a phase he'd grow out of, choosing to coddle him rather than discipline him. They'd given him unlimited spending money for years, allowed him to live rent-free at home with zero bills, zero responsibilities, zero accountability, and then acted shocked and devastated when his unaddressed addiction spiraled into massive debt. They also hid the fact that this was not Ethan's first gambling debt. He'd accumulated smaller debts before, hundreds and thousands of dollars at a time, and my parents had quietly paid every single one off without ever telling me. They'd cleaned up his messes privately, let him off scot-free every single time, and allowed his addictive behavior to escalate unchecked until it ballooned into a life-altering debt that they could no longer afford to cover on their own. Only then did they decide to come crying to me, weaponizing family obligation to force me to fix the problem they'd spent years enabling. My mom begged me, through constant sobs, to hand over every single dollar of my bonus. She pleaded that this was a family emergency, that Ethan would be ruined financially forever if I didn't help, that he would face collections calls, legal trouble, and destroyed credit for years if I refused to bail him out. She told me he was stressed, regretful, scared, and that this was my duty as a sister to save him. She painted Ethan as a poor, scared child who'd made a silly mistake, not a fully grown adult who'd gambled recklessly, lied continuously, and expected everyone else to sacrifice for his choices. She went on and on with emotional manipulation, listing every hypothetical worst-case scenario that would befall Ethan if I refused to give up my money. She claimed he would be sued, would have his wages garnished, would never be able to buy a house or a car in the future, would be shamed by friends and family, would fall into depression and ruin. She made it sound like my refusal to sacrifice my bonus would single-handedly destroy my brother's entire life, while completely ignoring the reality that his own choices and their endless enabling were the true cause of his crisis. I listened calmly to her entire breakdown, my heart sinking lower and lower with every word. I'd known my brother gambled, but I'd never realized how deep his debt had gotten. Still, I knew immediately that I could not do what she was asking. This bonus was my life's first real financial breakthrough. It was my reward for years of relentless hard work, self-sacrifice, and responsible living. It was money I needed to secure me future, not clean up my brother's self-created reckless mess. In that moment, I thought about all the nights I'd gone hungry to pay my own bills. I thought about all the holidays I'd spent working while my brother relaxed and enjoyed my parents' generosity. I thought about all the times I'd cried alone in my apartment, stressed about debt and survival, with no family to turn to for help. I thought about how every single good thing I'd ever earned in my life was earned through blood, sweat, and endless exhaustion, while my brother's every comfort was handed to him freely. I could not, would not, give up the first stable financial safety net I'd ever had to save a grown man who'd never lifted a finger to save himself. I spoke gently but firmly, with zero hesitation. Mom, I'm sorry Ethan is in trouble, but I cannot give you my entire bonus. This money is going to pay off my loans, fix my car, and build my safety savings. I've worked too hard for too long to drain everything I've earned to fix his gambling mistakes. He's an adult, and he needs to face the consequences of his own choices. The second I finished my sentence, her crying stopped instantly. The hysterical, vulnerable mother vanished, replaced by an angry, bitter, guilt-tripping parent. She raised her voice to a screaming shout, loud and sharp through the phone, and yelled the line that had haunted me my entire life: "You owe us for raising you. Do you have any idea how much we sacrificed to bring you into this world and raise you? This is how you repay us. By letting your own brother suffer? You're selfish, ungrateful, cold-hearted, and cruel." She kept screaming, going on a long rant about family obligation, about how children owe their parents everything, about how I was abandoning my family in their hour of need, about how I would regret being so heartless for the rest of my life. She accused me of being spoiled, entitled, and unappreciative, ironically the exact words they never used for my brother, who actually was spoiled and entitled his entire life. She twisted my self-preservation into unforgivable betrayal, painting me as the villain for refusing to destroy my own future to fix my brother's repeated, self-inflicted mistakes. For a long moment, I felt the familiar rush of guilt creep in. For a split second, I almost caved like I always had before. Years of conditioned people-pleasing, years of being told I was selfish for prioritizing myself, years of family gaslighting kicked in, and I almost gave in to her demands just to end the conflict, just to restore temporary peace, just to avoid being labeled the bad child again. But then I thought about every single bill I'd ever paid alone. Every medical expense. Every school fee. Every late-night shift I'd worked to survive while my brother lived off my parents' generosity. I thought about every time I'd sacrificed for them and received zero gratitude in return. And in that moment, I was completely done. I did not scream back. I did not argue. I did not defend myself with empty words. I simply told her calmly, "I have nothing more to say over the phone. I will send you all the proof you need." Then I ended the call, blocking out her final screams and accusations, finally choosing myself for the very first time in my life. 26:00-34:00 the email, compiling every single proof of my lifelong sacrifice. After ending the call, I sat down at my desk in my small, quiet apartment, my hands still slightly shaking from the intense emotional confrontation I just endured. I took 3 deep breaths to calm my racing heart, pushing back the years of repressed hurt, anger, and loneliness that had bubbled to the surface during my mom's screaming guilt trip. For over 12 years, I'd carried these emotions silently, never allowing myself to lash out, never allowing myself to blame my family, always choosing to be the bigger person and keep the peace. But today, peace was no longer worth sacrificing my future for. I began the most important, most therapeutic task of my entire life, compiling every single record of my lifelong financial independence and self-sacrifice. For over 12 years, I had kept every single receipt, every bill, every medical statement, every school payment confirmation, every transaction record from my teenage years to adulthood. I'd saved them all instinctively, back when I was just a 16-year-old kid working midnight shifts to pay for my own school supplies, lonely and confused about why my parents refused to support me while spoiling my brother endlessly. Even as a teenager, I'd had a quiet intuition that one day, I would need proof that I'd never been the selfish, ungrateful child they'd always made me out to be. My filing system was meticulous, organized, and thorough, another habit I'd developed from years of forced independence. I had separate labeled folders for every single year, dating back to my 16th birthday, 2016 through 2024. Each folder was divided into subcategories: school payments, medical and dental expenses, utility and living costs, vehicle expenses, and miscellaneous emergency payments. Every single file was scanned, dated, labeled, and backed up both physically and digitally, so no document could ever be lost, deleted, or disputed. I pulled out my organized digital folders and physical scanned files one by one, sorting through thousands of individual documents with steady, deliberate hands. I compiled every high school work payment record proving I'd funded all my teenage expenses alone, pay stubs from my bakery and retail jobs, bank deposit slips, cash payment confirmations, and receipts for every school textbook, uniform, and classroom supply I'd ever purchased. I included proof that I'd paid for my own SAT fees, my own high school graduation fees, my own yearbook, and my own prom ticket, small expenses that every parent normally covers for their child, all paid entirely by my teenage part-time income. I added every single college tuition payment, every student loan statement, every textbook receipt, every housing fee I'd covered entirely by myself. I included semester tuition bills I'd paid via scholarships and loan disbursements, monthly dorm housing payments, meal plan costs, and library fee receipts. I added records of every summer class I'd taken to graduate early, all funded by my own full-time summer jobs. I made sure to highlight every single payment date, proving that throughout my entire college career, my parents never contributed a single dollar to my education or living expenses. I included every medical bill, doctor visits, dentist appointments, prescription costs, emergency medical fees I'd paid out of pocket with zero parental reimbursement. I added records of a minor emergency room visit I'd endured during my sophomore year of college, when I'd fallen severely ill with a fever and dehydration, paid the entire ER bill alone, and never told my parents because I knew they would not help me and would only scold me for wasting money on medical care. I added dental cleaning receipts, cavity filling payments, eye exam and glasses costs, every single health expense I'd ever incurred, all paid solo. I added every utility bill I'd paid since moving out, every car repair receipt, every insurance payment, every living expense I had covered completely independently. I included monthly rent receipts, electricity, water, internet, and gas bills dating back to my first post-grad apartment. I added every oil change, tire replacement, brake repair, and engine fix for my old car, every auto insurance premium, every registration fee, all expenses my parents had never once offered to cover, even when they knew my car was constantly breaking down and draining my income. I also added a separate folder of proof of all the times I'd helped them over the years, to dismantle their lie that I'd never contributed to the family. I included receipts for grocery runs I'd paid for during family holidays, utility bill contributions I'd sent during my parents' financial tight months, cash transfers I'd given my mom for her birthday and medical costs, and small loans I'd given my dad that he'd never paid back. These documents proved I had never been a selfish child. I had given repeatedly, voluntarily, and generously, even when I could barely afford to help anyone myself. I organized every document in perfect chronological order, labeled every file clearly with dates and expense descriptions, and compiled them all into one comprehensive, organized email folder. The entire folder contained over 300 individual records spanning more than a decade, irrefutable, undeniable proof that I had paid for my entire life myself from the age of 16 onward. Every single document was time-stamped, verifiable, and impossible to argue with. There was no room for gaslighting, no room for lies, no room for fabricated guilt trips. I wrote a short, calm, factual email body with zero emotion, zero anger, zero attitude, no yelling, no sarcasm, no bitter remarks, just pure, unarguable truth. I simply stated, for your reference. These are all records of every personal expense, medical cost, school fee, and living cost I have covered independently since the age of 16. I have been fully self-sufficient for over 12 years. I have never cost this family a single dollar as an adult, and I have sacrificed consistently to help this family multiple times in the past. I do not owe anyone my hard-earned bonus to cover my brother's self-created gambling debt. My decision is final. I double-checked every attachment to ensure nothing was missing, scanned through the entire folder one last time to confirm every year of sacrifice was represented, then hit send and forwarded the email to both my mom and my dad's personal email addresses. In that quiet moment, I felt a weight start to lift off my shoulders that I'd been carrying for 12 long years. I knew exactly what would happen the second they opened those files. For the first time in their lives, they would be forced to see the full truth of how unfairly they had treated me, how much I had sacrificed, and how little they had ever contributed to my life. For the first time, their favorite guilt-tripping line would crumble completely under the weight of undeniable proof. This year, I decided enough was enough. I'd spent my entire youth and early adulthood sacrificing every comfort for stability, while my brother wasted his life away on reckless choices and my parents enabled every single bad decision he made. I worked more overtime hours than any other employee on my team, took on extra client projects, stayed late every single week, and sacrificed my weekends for work consistently for 2 full years that my hard work finally paid off. At my annual performance review, my manager officially informed me I would be receiving a substantial year-end performance bonus. It was the largest single sum of money I had ever earned in my life. After taxes, it was enough to completely eliminate my lingering student loan debt, replace my unreliable old car that constantly broke down, and build a proper 3-month emergency savings fund for myself for the first time ever. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't have to live paycheck to paycheck. For the first time, I could breathe. For the first time, I could reward myself for years of endless hard work and self-denial. I was overjoyed, relieved, and hopeful for my future. I planned every detail carefully: pay off debt, fix my transportation security, build safety savings, and finally stop living in constant financial fear that I only told my parents about the bonus in passing during a casual phone call, thinking they would be proud of me. I thought they would acknowledge my years of hard work, my discipline, my responsibility, and my independence. I thought for once, they would celebrate my success instead of only celebrating my brother's smallest wins. I was utterly wrong. The second the words left my mouth, their entire tone shifted. The casual, friendly conversation vanished instantly. My mom went quiet on the phone for several long seconds, and I could hear her and my dad whispering rapidly in the background. I had no idea at that moment that my brother's gambling addiction had finally caught up to him in the worst way possible, and that my family was already planning to drain my bonus to clean up his massive mess. The very next morning, I received an urgent incoming call from my mom. I answered assuming it was a quick follow-up check-in about my bonus. Instead, I was greeted with loud, hysterical sobbing. My mom was crying uncontrollably, her voice shaking, gasping for breath like her world was falling apart. I immediately panicked, asking her what was wrong, if someone was hurt, if there was an emergency. Through her tears, she finally explained the crisis. My brother Ethan had accumulated a huge, dangerous gambling debt from months of online betting and sports gambling. He'd hidden the debt from my parents for months, lying about his spending, hiding bank statements, and covering his tracks until the creditors finally threatened legal action and late fees that would destroy his credit permanently. The total debt was almost the exact amount of my entire bonus check that my mom begged me, through constant sobs, to hand over every single dollar of my bonus. She pleaded that this was a family emergency, that Ethan would be ruined financially forever if I didn't help, that he would face collections calls, legal trouble, and destroyed credit for years if I refused to bail him out. She told me he was stressed, regretful, scared, and that this was my duty as a sister to save him. I listened calmly to her entire breakdown, my heart sinking lower and lower with every word. I'd known my brother gambled, but I'd never realized how deep his debt had gotten. Still, I knew immediately that I could not do what she was asking. This bonus was my life's first real financial breakthrough. It was my reward for years of relentless hard work, self-sacrifice, and responsible living. It was money I needed to secure my future, not clean up my brother's self-created reckless mess. That I spoke gently but firmly, with zero hesitation. Mom, I'm sorry Ethan is in trouble, but I cannot give you my entire bonus. This money is going to pay off my loans, fix my car, and build my safety savings. I've worked too hard for too long to drain everything I've earned to fix his gambling mistakes. He's an adult, and he needs to face the consequences of his own choices. The second I finished my sentence, her crying stopped instantly. The hysterical, vulnerable mother vanished, replaced by an angry, bitter, guilt-tripping parent. She raised her voice to a screaming shout, loud and sharp through the phone, and yelled the line that had haunted me my entire life: "You owe us for raising you. Do you have any idea how much we sacrificed to bring you into this world and raise you? This is how you repay us. By letting your own brother suffer? You're selfish, ungrateful, cold-hearted, and cruel." She kept screaming, going on a long rant about family obligation, about how children owe their parents everything, about how I was abandoning my family in their hour of need, about how I would regret being so heartless for the rest of my life. She accused me of being spoiled, entitled, and unappreciative, ironically the exact words they never used for my brother, who actually was spoiled and entitled his entire life. For a long moment, I felt the familiar rush of guilt creep in. For a split second, I almost caved like I always had before. But then I thought about every single bill I'd ever paid alone. Every medical expense. Every school fee. Every late-night shift I'd worked to survive while my brother lived off my parents' generosity. I thought about every time I'd sacrificed for them and received zero gratitude in return. And in that moment, I was completely done. I did not scream back. I did not argue. I did not defend myself with empty words. I simply told her calmly, "I have nothing more to say over the phone. I will send you all the proof you need." Then I ended the call. After ending the call, I sat down at my desk and began the most important, most therapeutic task of my entire life, compiling every single record of my lifelong financial independence and self-sacrifice. For over 12 years, I had kept every single receipt, every bill, every medical statement, every school payment confirmation, every transaction record from my teenage years to adulthood. I'd saved them all instinctively, knowing one day I would need to prove I had never owed my family a single cent of debt. I pulled out my organized digital folders and physical scanned files. I compiled every high school work payment record proving I'd funded all my teenage expenses alone. I added every single college tuition payment, every student loan statement, every textbook receipt, every housing fee I'd covered entirely by myself. I included every medical bill, doctor visits, dentist appointments, prescription costs, emergency medical fees I'd paid out of pocket with zero parental reimbursement that I added every utility bill I'd paid since moving out, every car repair receipt, every insurance payment, every living expense I had covered completely independently. I organized every document in chronological order, labeled every file clearly, and compiled them all into one comprehensive, organized email folder. The entire folder contained over 300 individual records spanning more than a decade, irrefutable, undeniable proof that I had paid for my entire life myself. I wrote a short, calm, factual email body with zero emotion, zero anger, zero attitude. I simply stated, for your reference. These are all records of every personal expense, medical cost, school fee, and living cost I have covered independently since the age of 16. I have been fully self-sufficient for over 12 years. I have never cost this family a single dollar as an adult, and I have sacrificed consistently to help this family multiple times in the past. I do not owe anyone my hard-earned bonus to cover my brother's self-created gambling debt. My decision is final. I double-checked every attachment to ensure nothing was missing, then hit send and forwarded the email to both my mom and my dad's personal email addresses. I knew exactly what would happen the second they opened those files. For the first time in their lives, they would be forced to see the full truth of how unfairly they had treated me, how much I had sacrificed, and how little they had ever contributed to my life. 34:00-39:00 The silent aftermath. Mom goes radio silent completely. The second the email delivered, the family's guilt-tripping campaign came to an abrupt, dead stop. For hours after sending the records, my phone remained completely silent. No more calls, no more frantic texts, no more crying pleas, no more angry accusations. My mom stopped texting me entirely. She did not reply to my email. She did not send a single follow-up message. She did not attempt to call me again. The hysterical, desperate, angry mother from the phone call vanished completely. She had no more arguments left. She had no more guilt trips to use. She had no more ground to stand on when faced with irrefutable proof that I had already paid my dues 1,000 times over. The line, "You owe us for raising you," crumbled completely in front of every bill, every receipt, every payment record I'd spent years saving. My dad also went completely quiet. He did not text, did not call, did not comment. They both knew the truth was undeniable. They knew they could no longer pretend I was an ungrateful child. They knew they could no longer claim I owed them endless sacrifice when the records proved I had supported myself entirely for over a decade while they spoiled my reckless brother. The silence was deafening, but it was the most peaceful silence I had experienced in my entire adult life. For the first time, I did not feel obligated to fix my family's unfair dynamics. For the first time, I did not carry the weight of their favoritism on my shoulders. For the first time, I had concrete proof that my sacrifices were real, my hard work was valid, and their guilt-tripping was entirely fabricated. Unfortunately, the quiet peace did not last long. While my parents went completely silent, my dad quickly forwarded my entire email folder to the massive extended family group chat containing over 30 relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and distant family members. He did not include my email explanation. He did not share my side of the story. He simply dropped the entire file of records into the group chat with a short, manipulative caption: "Elise is refusing to help her brother in a life crisis after earning a large bonus. She claims she owes nothing to this family." That single manipulative message ignited absolute war in the family group chat. Within minutes, the entire chat exploded with hundreds of angry messages attacking me non-stop. Every single family member rushed to judge me without reading a single one of my attached records, without hearing a single one of my explanations, without knowing a single detail of the decades of unfair treatment I had endured. My aunts accused me of being cold, heartless, and ungrateful. They said I was abandoning my own blood, that money had corrupted me, that I had forgotten my family roots. My uncles called me selfish, spoiled, and arrogant for refusing to help my brother. My older cousins lectured me about family loyalty, telling me siblings always sacrifice for each other no matter what. My younger cousins commented passive-aggressive messages about how success makes people cruel. Multiple family members commented that I was wrong for punishing my brother for his mistakes, that family overlooks flaws and helps no matter what. No one stopped to ask why my brother had accumulated massive gambling debts in the first place. No one questioned why my parents had enabled his reckless habits for years. No one acknowledged that I had supported myself entirely since 16 while my brother was fully funded by our parents well into adulthood. That the entire family focused solely on painting me as the villain. They framed my hard-earned bonus as greedy wealth, my boundary setting as cruelty, and my self-preservation as betrayal. For hours, the group chat flooded with non-stop negativity, judgment, and accusations against me. Relatives I barely spoke to suddenly became experts on my life, judging my choices without any context or understanding. Watching the entire family turn against me in an instant was hurtful, but it was also incredibly eye-opening. It proved to me exactly what I had suspected my entire life. My family never cared about fairness, never cared about my struggles, never cared about my hard work. They only cared about blind, one-sided family loyalty that requires only me to sacrifice, while the favored child faces zero accountability. That I did not argue with a single family member in the group chat. I did not defend myself. I did not post long explanations. I did not beg for understanding. I simply took a screenshot of my original email with all attached records and reposted it directly into the group chat with one single sentence: "All proof of my lifelong self-sufficiency is attached. I have paid for every single part of my life alone since I was 16. My brother's gambling debt is not my responsibility." The second I posted that full proof, the group chat slowly began to go quiet. A few family members went back to skim through the hundreds of records I'd attached. A handful of cousins quietly deleted their judgmental comments. A few aunts stopped typing mid-rant. The manipulation from my parents collapsed the second the full truth was visible for everyone to see. Slowly but surely, the angry messages stopped. The accusations faded. The lecturing ended. The family realized they had been played. They realized my parents had hidden the full story, hidden my decades of sacrifice, hidden the lifelong favoritism, and only shared the parts that painted me as the villain. By the end of the night, the entire group chat went completely silent. No more arguments, no more judgments, no more lectures. Everyone had seen the proof. Everyone knew the truth now. Today, the dynamic in my family has shifted permanently. My mom still has not texted or called me since the day I sent those records. She has no more guilt to throw at me, no more lies to hide behind, no more unfair demands to make. My dad no longer attempts to manipulate extended family against me. My brother has finally been forced to face the consequences of his own gambling debt. He's taken on extra work to pay it off himself, and he's stopped expecting everyone else to clean up his messes for the first time in his life. I have kept every single dollar of my hard-earned bonus. I paid off my lingering student loans, repaired my car, and built my emergency savings fund. For the first time in my life, I have financial security and peace of mind. I no longer carry the burden of my family's favoritism or my brother's irresponsibility. The hardest but most vital lesson I learned through this entire ordeal is this: family obligation is never one-sided. You do not owe endless sacrifice to people who only take from you, who never support you, who favor other family members over you, and who guilt-trip you for protecting your own future. The phrase, "you owe us for raising you," only applies if your family actually raised you, supported you, and sacrificed for you, not if you raised and supported yourself entirely. In the weeks and months that followed this incident, I witnessed a complete, irreversible shift in every single family dynamic, one that I had spent my entire life praying for but never thought I'd get to experience. For years, I'd grown accustomed to being the default giver, the quiet supporter, the child who was always expected to bend, compromise, and sacrifice just to keep the family peace. I'd normalized being overlooked, unappreciated, and taken for granted, believing that this was simply my role as the responsible younger sister. I'd conditioned myself to accept that my brother would always be coddled, my parents would always prioritize his comfort over my stability, and my hard work would always be exploited to cover his failures. But after I sent those 12 years of financial records and broke their cycle of guilt manipulation, every single unfair rule they'd enforced for my entire life crumbled to the ground. What surprised me most was not my parents' silence, but the slow, quiet shift in how the entire extended family viewed the situation once the initial mob mentality faded. After the group chat went dead silent, many of my relatives took the time to actually open and scroll through my hundreds of attached records. They saw the teenage medical bills I'd paid alone at 16, the college tuition receipts no one had helped me cover, the endless utility and living expenses I'd shouldered through my poorest, most exhausting years, and the small, repeated sums I'd given my family out of kindness even when I could barely afford my own rent. They finally understood the full, brutal truth. I had never been the selfish, ungrateful child they'd been led to believe I was. Instead, I was the child who had given endlessly, sacrificed relentlessly, and asked for nothing in return, only to be villainized for finally choosing myself for once. Several of my older cousins reached out to me privately with long, sincere apologies. They admitted they'd rushed to judge me based on my dad's manipulative one-sided post, without stopping to ask for my side of the story or consider the decades of unfair family favoritism they'd all quietly witnessed growing up. They confessed that they'd always noticed how Ethan was spoiled rotten while I was forced to be independent beyond my years, but they'd never spoken up to avoid family conflict. They told me they deeply respected me for setting firm boundaries and standing up for myself after years of silent sacrifice, and they promised not to blindly take my parents' side in future family disputes. Even some of my aunts and uncles who'd attacked me publicly in the group chat sent private messages walking back their harsh words. They acknowledged that it was wildly unfair to demand I drain my life-changing bonus, money I'd earned through years of brutal overtime and self-denial, to bail out my brother's self-inflicted gambling mess. They pointed out the obvious double standard. If Ethan had earned a large bonus, no one would have ever demanded he hand over every penny to support me or cover any family expense. That eye-opening realization forced the entire family to confront the toxic favoritism that had lingered in our household for generations. As for my parents, their silent treatment was never the angry, punishing silence they'd used on me in the past. It was the defeated, ashamed silence of people who finally knew they could no longer manipulate me with guilt and empty family obligation speeches. They had no leg to stand on. Every time they tried to formulate a new argument, every time they attempted to manufacture guilt or pressure me into apologizing, the mountain of receipts and records I'd sent stared them in the face. They could no longer claim they'd sacrificed endlessly to raise me, because the proof showed I'd raised myself financially from the age of 16 onward. My mom, who once screamed and sobbed to force me into submission, never again brought up the words, "You owe us for raising you." She never asked me for another dollar, never pressured me to help my brother, never tried to guilt-trip me for my choices. She stopped making passive-aggressive comments about family duty, stopped comparing my dedication to my brother's irresponsibility, and stopped expecting me to drop everything for the family's convenience. For the first time in my adult life, our interactions were calm, neutral, and free of emotional blackmail. My brother Ethan underwent the most dramatic change of all. For the first time in his 29 years of life, he had no safety net to fall back on. My parents, faced with their own shame and the judgment of the extended family, finally stopped bailing him out of every reckless mistake. They refused to use their savings to clear his gambling debt this time, forcing him to confront the real-world consequences of his addictive, self-destructive choices. He was forced to pick up 2 full-time manual labor jobs, working early mornings and late nights to slowly pay off his creditors month by month. Gone was the entitled, lazy brother who expected everyone to clean up his messes. He stopped spending recklessly on online gambling, expensive takeout, and useless luxury items. He stopped complaining about hard work, stopped quitting jobs at the first sign of difficulty, and stopped expecting the world to cater to his every whim. For the first time, he understood the value of hard-earned money, the exact value I'd known and respected since I was a teenager. He even sent me a short, awkward, sincere apology message, admitting that he'd taken my sacrifice for granted his entire life, that he knew he'd been spoiled and selfish, and that he didn't blame me at all for refusing to ruin my future to fix his mistakes. As for me, the peace I've gained is priceless and irreplaceable. I successfully paid off every last dollar of my lingering student loan debt, repaired my aging car to full working condition, and built a robust emergency savings fund that has eliminated my lifelong financial anxiety. I no longer live in constant fear of unexpected bills or financial ruin. I no longer stay up late stressing about how to stretch every paycheck to survive. I get to enjoy the fruits of my own hard work for the very first time, without guilt, without obligation, without anyone demanding I give it all away for someone else's mistakes. I've also learned to set permanent, healthy boundaries that have healed years of emotional trauma. I no longer volunteer my money, my time, or my resources to a family that only takes from me. I no longer apologize for prioritizing my own stability, my own happiness, and my own future. I no longer carry the toxic weight of being the family's perpetual fixer and scapegoat. I've realized that kindness and sacrifice only hold meaning when they are mutual. Giving endlessly to people who never give back is not love or loyalty, it's self-abuse. This experience rewired my entire understanding of family and obligation. True family love is not one-sided sacrifice, blind loyalty, or endless guilt-tripping. It is mutual respect, equal support, shared responsibility, and genuine care for every member's well-being. If a family only values you for what you can give, only loves you when you sacrifice, and only acknowledges your existence when they need your money or help, they do not love you at all. They only love the benefit they get from you. I share this story not to fuel bitterness or resentment, but to empower every single overlooked, responsible child stuck in a toxic, favoritism-heavy family dynamic. You do not have to spend your entire life paying for your siblings' mistakes. You do not have to repay your parents for raising you a decade after you've become fully self-sufficient. You do not have to drain your hard-earned success to rescue entitled family members who refuse to grow up and take accountability for themselves. Your future, your finances, and your peace of mind are always worth protecting. If you've ever been guilt-tripped into sacrificing your hard-earned money for a family member's selfish mistakes, if you've ever been the overlooked, responsible child in a favoritism-heavy family, drop a comment below and share your story. Subscribe for more true calm drama stories about quiet strength, long overdue boundaries, and stopping one-sided family sacrifice. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next true story.